Billionaire CEO kicked his mother out of the plane because of a mistress. Few minutes he regretted it. The city skyline glittered like silver fire that night, and inside the tallest glass tower sat Wyatt Sterling, the man everyone called the perfect son. He was young, brilliant, and coldly confident. Every movement he made spoke power, every word he said commanded attention. The board members of Sterling Global feared him, but they also admired him. To them, Wyatt was the future, sharp, untouchable, and born to rule. Yet behind that calm smile, he carried the heavy shadow of someone who had raised him right, Margaret Sterling, his mother. She had built his world, taught him every rule of leadership, and molded him into the man the world now praised. But Wyatt rarely showed gratitude. He loved his mother, yes, but deep down, he wanted the world to see him, not her legacy. Margaret entered his office that evening, her calm face hiding quiet concern. "Wyatt, I warned you about expanding into the East Market too fast," she said softly. Wyatt didn't look up from his laptop. "Mother, times have changed. I don't run this company on emotion. I run it on results." Her tone sharpened. "And results without wisdom destroy empires." He slammed his pen down. "You think I don't know what I'm doing? You've had your time. Let me breathe." For the first time, Margaret saw something frightening in his eyes, pride that bordered on arrogance. She sighed and left quietly, whispering, "I only wanted to protect what we built." When the door closed, Wyatt muttered under his breath, "You built your legacy, mother. Now it's my turn." At dinner that night, the silence between them felt heavy. Margaret tried to soften the air. "Wyatt, I worry you're forgetting where you came from." He smirked. "Where I came from is why I never want to go back. I'm not running a family home, I'm running a global empire." Her face fell. "Power doesn't make you great, son. Character does." He laughed bitterly. "Character doesn't pay bills or win contracts." She looked at him sadly, realizing the boy she raised was slowly being replaced by the man she feared, ambitious, restless, untouchable. He was becoming exactly what success often breeds, blind pride. A few days later, during a board presentation, Wyatt cut off one of the senior executives, a man who had worked with Margaret for years. "Don't quote my mother's old rules to me," Wyatt snapped. "This is my company now." The room went silent. Even his closest allies exchanged worried looks. That moment marked the beginning of something darker, the slow, painful separation of a son from his mother's influence. Later, in her office, Margaret watched a live news clip praising Wyatt's new leadership. But the smile on her face was hollow. She could see the pride growing in him like a disease, silent but deadly. That night, Wyatt stood by his window, phone in hand. A message blinked from an unknown number. "You deserve to be seen for who you really are, not your mother's shadow." He frowned. "Who is this?" The next message came instantly. "You built this empire. Don't let anyone take credit for it." It intrigued him. Someone out there understood him, someone who saw what he truly felt but never said aloud. Days turned into weeks, and those mysterious messages continued. The sender's name finally appeared, Isabella Hart. She was a name whispered in social circles, a stunning, wealthy socialite with a reputation for getting what she wanted. Their first meeting was not accidental. She walked into his world like she belonged there, bold, elegant, confident. "You're even more handsome when you're angry," she said, smiling after one of his boardroom clashes. Wyatt smirked. "And you're not afraid to say what others won't." From that moment, something dangerous began to spark between them. Margaret noticed the change almost immediately. Wyatt started missing family dinners, coming home late, speaking with unusual sharpness. He dismissed her opinions, cut her short mid-sentence, and rolled his eyes when she advised him. One evening, when she asked where he'd been, he replied coldly, "Meeting investors." But the perfume on his suit told another story. Margaret's voice trembled. You're changing, Wyatt. And not for the better. He shot back, I'm evolving. Maybe you should too. The words cut her deeply. She had built him from the ground up, and now he spoke to her like she was an employee, not his mother. Alone that night, Margaret sat in her study, tears quietly falling. She opened an old photograph, young Wyatt in his school uniform, smiling proudly beside her after his first achievement award. She whispered, "Where did my son go?" Meanwhile, Wyatt sat at an exclusive restaurant across town with Izzy. She leaned close and whispered, "Your mother's holding you back. You'll never truly lead while she's still pulling your strings." Wyatt forced a laugh, but her words hit him harder than he wanted to admit. Later that night, as he drove home, Margaret called him. "Wyatt, please don't let strangers make you forget who you are." He snapped, "Mother, I'm not a child. Stop trying to run my life." There was a pause. "Then maybe," she said quietly, "you're no longer the son I raised." He hung up. But her words haunted him long after. He looked in the mirror and saw a proud, successful man, yet something in his reflection looked hollow. A shadow of guilt. A trace of fear. A question he couldn't silence. What if she's right? That night, Wyatt couldn't sleep. His empire was growing, his name was everywhere, yet his heart felt smaller than ever. And somewhere deep inside him, he knew, the storm had already begun. She entered like thunder wrapped in silk. The grand ballroom froze when Isabella Izzy Hart walked in, a woman too beautiful to ignore and too dangerous to trust. Her dress shimmered like poured gold, her eyes sharp as glass. She moved through the crowd like she owned it. Men turned. Women whispered. And Wyatt Sterling, the untouchable CEO, looked at her and forgot the rest of the world. Izzy knew the effect she had. It wasn't luck, it was skill. Her charm was her weapon, and she used it without mercy. That night, she walked straight to Wyatt's table. "You're Wyatt Sterling," she said softly, as if she had discovered a secret instead of a name. "The man who builds empires but smiles like he's hiding something." Wyatt smirked. "And you are?" "Someone who likes to find out what powerful men are afraid of," she replied. And just like that, she had him. A week later, their names were already being whispered together at every event. Izzy was bold, fiery, unfiltered, the exact opposite of the disciplined Margaret Sterling. She laughed loudly, spoke carelessly, and lived like life was a stage meant only for her spotlight. Wyatt admired her fearlessness. He had never met anyone who didn't fear power, until her. But behind the laughter, Izzy watched him carefully. She learned his patterns, his moods, his wounds. She noticed how quickly he tensed when someone mentioned his mother. She noticed how easily his pride could be touched. And she used it, gently at first, then sharper with time. "You're too kind to her," she said one evening over dinner. "Your mother treats you like a boy. You're a man, Wyatt. You don't need permission to lead." Wyatt's jaw tightened. "She's just cautious." "Cautious?" Izzy leaned closer. "Or controlling." The seed was planted. Margaret sensed something was wrong long before she met Izzy. Wyatt had become colder, harder to reach. He brushed off her calls, skipped meetings she invited him to, and spoke with a tone she barely recognized. When she finally saw Izzy for the first time, in a glittering red gown beside her son at a charity event, she knew instantly. This woman was not here for love. She was here for control. Margaret tried to be polite, but Izzy's eyes told her everything, eyes that said, "I'm not afraid of you." Later that night, Margaret pulled Wyatt aside. "Be careful with her," she said gently. "There's danger in people who love too quickly." Wyatt rolled his eyes. "Mother, not everyone I meet is your enemy. She's not your friend either." He sighed, frustrated. "You don't trust anyone but yourself." "And you trust too easily," she answered. But he was already walking away. Izzy's plan unfolded smoothly. She began isolating Wyatt from everyone who challenged her presence. She flattered him until he felt like a god. "You don't need your mother's rules," she whispered. "You built this empire, not her." Wyatt smiled, proud and blind. He believed her words because they sounded like the truth he wanted to hear. Soon, arguments with Margaret became daily storms. "You're listening to her lies," Margaret shouted once in his office. "And you're jealous of her influence." Wyatt shot back. "Jealous?" Margaret's voice trembled. "Jealous of a woman who wants your downfall?" He slammed his desk. "Enough. I don't need your approval." Izzy, waiting outside, smiled faintly. Her work was almost done. A few days later, Wyatt took Izzy on a trip to Paris for a corporate event. Reporters called them the power couple. Cameras flashed. Izzy loved every second. She held his arm proudly, whispering things like, "You see? You're unstoppable without anyone holding you back." Back home, Margaret watched the headlines. Wyatt Sterling's new flame steals the spotlight. She turned off the television, her hands trembling. She had seen ambition ruin men before, but never thought it would happen to her son. Weeks passed. Izzy's presence in Wyatt's office became normal. She would sit on his desk, flipping through company files, acting like she belonged there. When employees questioned it, Wyatt defended her fiercely. "She's my advisor," he lied. One afternoon, Margaret walked in unexpectedly. Izzy didn't move from the chair. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Sterling," she said coldly. Margaret smiled faintly. "I see you've made yourself comfortable." Izzy crossed her legs. "I go where Wyatt needs me." Margaret's eyes hardened. "And you think that's here?" Wyatt interrupted sharply. "Mother, please. Don't make a scene." Margaret's voice was calm but cutting. "I hope you remember, Wyatt, that not everyone who flatters you loves you." Wyatt turned away. "This conversation is over." Izzy smirked. She had won, at least for now. Behind closed doors, however, cracks began to show. Izzy's charm turned into dominance. She started making decisions in Wyatt's name, canceling meetings, and demanding loyalty from his staff. When he confronted her once, she laughed. "You're nothing without me. You were just a puppet under your mother. I made you a king." Wyatt's pride wouldn't allow him to admit it, but he was starting to feel trapped. Every compliment came with control. Every kiss came with manipulation. Yet, he couldn't let go, not out of love, but out of pride. He didn't want to prove his mother right. Margaret, meanwhile, began quietly observing. She noticed financial records shifting, staff resigning, and rumors spreading. Izzy's influence was spreading like poison. But she said nothing, not yet. She was waiting for the perfect moment. One evening, Wyatt returned home late. Margaret was waiting in the hallway. "Wyatt," she said softly, "you're losing yourself." He brushed past her. "I'm building my own life." "At what cost?" she asked. He paused, anger rising. "You hate that someone else has my attention. You can't control me anymore." Margaret's eyes glistened. "I don't want control, Wyatt. I want you to see who's controlling you." He stormed away, slamming the door behind him. Alone in his room, Wyatt stared into the mirror again, the same reflection, the same question haunting him. Am I the man I wanted to become, or the man she made me? And somewhere across the city, Izzy poured herself a glass of wine, smiling. Soon, she whispered to her reflection, "He'll have no one left but me." The next morning came with quiet sunlight, but Wyatt's world was far from calm. He sat in his office staring at his reflection on the glass wall, the image of a man who had everything yet felt something slipping away. His phone buzzed. A message from Izzy. Don't let your mother make you feel small again today. He smirked and slid the phone away, pretending it didn't bother him. But the truth was, it did. Her words sank deep, quiet, poisonous, invisible. Later that day, Margaret called. Wyatt, have you approved the new contract without review? That's risky. He sighed. Mother, please. I know what I'm doing. I'm just trying to help. That's the problem, he snapped. You don't trust me to lead. There was silence. She whispered, I trust you, son. I just don't trust the people whispering around you. Wyatt's jaw clenched. He ended the call without another word. Izzy's whisper had already done its work. That evening, Wyatt met Izzy at a luxury rooftop bar. The city lights glowed beneath them like fireflies. She looked stunning, every inch of her plan to perfection. She smiled faintly. She called again, didn't she? He frowned. You don't miss anything, do you? I don't have to. It's written all over your face, she said, sipping her drink. Your mother doesn't believe in you. Every time she questions you, it's her way of saying she's still in charge. That's not true, Wyatt said softly. She's just protective. Izzy leaned closer. Her voice dropped. Protective? Or controlling? There's a difference. You're a grown man, Wyatt, not a child. When will she stop treating you like one? Wyatt said nothing, but his silence was enough. The seed had been planted deeper. Days passed. Izzy began visiting the office more often, always under the excuse of supporting Wyatt. She smiled at the employees, charmed the executives, and slowly turned herself into part of the company's daily routine. Margaret hated it. She doesn't belong here, she told Wyatt one afternoon. Wyatt shrugged. She's helping me manage public relations. She's distracting you, Margaret said sharply. Wyatt's voice hardened. Mother, you're making things difficult for no reason. For no reason? Her eyes burned. I've watched that woman twist you like clay, and you call that nothing? He rose from his chair. You know what, maybe I need less advice and more space. Space, she repeated bitterly. From your own mother? He walked past her, refusing to answer. The look in her eyes, pain mixed with pride, followed him out of the room. That night, Izzy arrived at Wyatt's penthouse with a bottle of champagne. To your independence, she said, raising a glass. He laughed tiredly. You think I'm independent? You will be, she said, touching his cheek gently. Once you stop letting her run your world. Wyatt's face darkened. You don't understand. My mother built this empire. Izzy smiled sweetly. And now it's your turn to keep it. Don't let her use guilt to control you. Her tone was soft, but her words were sharp, slicing through the thin thread of loyalty he still held. The next day, Margaret entered the company boardroom for a meeting and found Izzy already seated beside Wyatt, flipping through financial documents like she owned them. Margaret's tone was cold. I wasn't aware we had a new board member. Izzy smiled politely. Oh, I'm not. I'm just helping Wyatt review projections. Margaret looked at her son. Do you really think it's wise to share confidential reports with someone outside the company? Wyatt frowned. Mother, please. Not here. Her voice sharpened. Then where, Wyatt? At her apartment? On a dinner date? A tense silence filled the room. Wyatt's pride snapped. Enough. You're embarrassing me in front of my partner. The word partner hit Margaret like a slap. Her eyes glistened, but she stood tall. Be careful, Wyatt. The people who flatter you the most often want something you'll regret giving. She turned and left, her heels echoing through the hall like the sound of finality. Izzy leaned back in her chair, smiling quietly. She doesn't respect you, Wyatt. She never has. Wyatt didn't respond. But inside, something was cracking. That night, he couldn't sleep. He remembered every word his mother had said, and every whisper Izzy had fed him. Two voices fought inside his head, one filled with truth, the other with poison disguised as love. He walked to the window, staring at the dark city below. Maybe she's right, he whispered to himself. Maybe my mother doesn't trust me. The next morning, Margaret arrived at the office to find her name missing from a key investor meeting. When she confronted Wyatt, he said calmly, "I thought it was best handled without too many opinions." "Too many opinions?" she repeated slowly. "You mean mine." He gave a cold smile. "You've had your time, Mother. Let me run this company my way." Her eyes filled with pain. "Your way, or hers?" Wyatt's voice rose. "Don't start again." Margaret stood straight, her voice low but firm. "You're losing yourself, Wyatt. And when she's done using you, you'll realize it's too late." He turned away, angry and ashamed. "I'm done listening to your warnings." Margaret's voice broke softly. "And I'm done trying to save you from yourself." She walked out, leaving silence behind her, and guilt Wyatt refused to admit. Later that night, Izzy found him alone in his study. She pretended concern, sitting beside him. "She hurt you again, didn't she?" He sighed. "She doesn't understand me anymore." Izzy rested her head on his shoulder. "That's because she doesn't want you to grow. She wants to keep you under her thumb." Wyatt stared ahead blankly. "Maybe you're right." Izzy smiled faintly. "I'm always right, darling." And that was the night Wyatt Sterling crossed the invisible line, the line between doubt and distance, between reason and pride. He didn't realize it yet, but every whisper he allowed into his ear was shaping his downfall. And somewhere, deep inside his mother's heart, Margaret Sterling felt a quiet storm brewing, the kind that destroys not buildings, but families. The days after the last argument felt colder inside the Sterling mansion. Wyatt avoided his mother's gaze at breakfast, speaking only through short answers. The warmth that once filled their home had turned into thin silence. Even the staff noticed, whispers of "Madam" and "the boss don't speak anymore" floated through the halls. Margaret knew Izzy's shadow was growing thicker over her son, but she stayed calm. She had faced storms before, just not one wearing red lipstick and a smile. That morning, she opened her son's office door and found him deep in conversation with Izzy. They both went silent when she walked in. The look on Wyatt's face said, "You shouldn't be here." The look on Izzy's face said, "You've already lost him." Margaret smiled faintly. "I came to remind you about the meeting with the auditors. Some documents seem missing." Izzy was quick. "Oh, those?" Wyatt said not to bother you with the small details. "You're too busy." Margaret turned to her son, her eyes searching his. "Is that true?" Wyatt hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, Mother. I've got it handled." Her heart cracked quietly. It wasn't the words, it was the lie behind them. Later that week, Margaret's assistant brought her shocking news. 2 important contracts had been signed without her knowledge, both bearing Wyatt's signature. When she questioned the finance department, they hesitated. Sir said not to share reports with anyone but him and Miss Izzy. Miss Izzy. That name stung like fire. That evening, she confronted Wyatt in his penthouse. The city lights behind him painted his silhouette in gold and glass. "Wyatt," she began, "you've changed protocols. Since when does an outsider approve financials in our family company?" Wyatt folded his arms. "Izzy's not an outsider. She's helping me modernize the system." "Modernize?" Margaret scoffed. "By shutting out the board?" By lying to your own mother? Wyatt's tone grew cold. You think I'm lying because you're not in control anymore. Her voice trembled. I think you're being deceived. Izzy appeared from the hallway, her lips curved in a calm smile. Good evening, Mrs. Sterling. I didn't realize this was an interrogation. Margaret turned sharply. And I didn't realize this was your house. Izzy smirked. It's where Wyatt feels at peace, something I'm not sure he feels when you're around. Wyatt looked away. He didn't stop her. He didn't defend his mother. And that silence, that cruel, heavy silence, hurt more than 1,000 insults. A few nights later, a family dinner was arranged to make peace. Margaret agreed, though her heart warned her it wouldn't end well. The restaurant glowed with candles and chandeliers, but the air between them was sharp as glass. Izzy arrived late, in a deep red dress that turned every head. She sat beside Wyatt, brushing his arm lightly, smiling at Margaret as if she were the guest, not the matriarch. So, Izzy said sweetly, I heard you used to run everything, Mrs. Sterling. Must be hard, letting go. Margaret set her fork down. Letting go isn't hard when you trust the person holding it. Izzy's smile widened. Then maybe the problem is that you don't trust him. Margaret's eyes darkened. I don't trust people who whisper lies into his ear. Wyatt's jaw tightened. Mother, stop. But Izzy wasn't done. You're right, Mrs. Sterling. You are a queen, but maybe it's time for the queen to step down. The table went silent. The waiter froze mid-step. Margaret's hands trembled, but she didn't break. Be careful, young lady, she said softly, the crown you mock is the same one feeding you. Izzy leaned closer to Wyatt. See? This is what I mean, she'll never let you be free. Margaret stood. Free from love, or from truth? Wyatt didn't speak. He couldn't. His silence was louder than any word he could have said. She turned to leave, her voice barely steady. You've finally chosen your peace, Wyatt. I hope it's worth the price. When she left, Izzy exhaled dramatically. That woman thrives on control. Wyatt rubbed his temples. You didn't have to provoke her. She provokes herself, Izzy said coldly. You're just too soft to see it. Wyatt frowned. She's my mother. Izzy's tone softened, but the venom remained. And I'm the only one who truly believes in you. Those words, sweet and poisonous, wrapped around his mind like silk chains. He wanted to argue, but part of him believed her. At home, Margaret sat alone by the fireplace. She didn't cry, she was far too strong for that. But her heart ached like a wound she couldn't reach. She whispered to herself, I've built empires, but I couldn't protect my own son from a clever smile. Her assistant entered quietly. Ma'am, the auditors confirmed something strange. The offshore account. Margaret raised her hand. Don't say it yet. I already know who's behind it. Meanwhile, Wyatt stared at his reflection in the mirror, again. The same reflection that once looked proud now looked uncertain. He tried to convince himself he was in control. That Izzy loved him. That his mother was simply too old-fashioned to understand. But beneath all that confidence lived a single whisper he couldn't silence. What if she's right? The next morning, Izzy showed up at his office with coffee and a smile. Forget last night, she said, sitting on his desk. Your mother's just threatened by us. She doesn't like losing power. Wyatt's voice was flat. She's not losing power. She's losing patience. Izzy laughed lightly. Then let her. Soon, she'll realize this is your empire now, not hers. He looked at her, beautiful, fearless, manipulative. And for the first time, he felt both desire and fear at once. He knew one of them was lying to him. He just didn't know which one. That night, while Margaret reviewed the forged documents and Izzy poured wine in Wyatt's glass whispering, "Trust me, the war for Sterling Global had already begun, not with guns or lawyers, but with words, pride, and silence sharp enough to kill love itself." The morning sky was a soft gold when the Sterling private jet waited on the runway, sleek, polished, and silent. Inside, Wyatt looked every inch the powerful CEO. Izzy sat beside him in a fitted cream dress, legs crossed, sunglasses on, flipping through a glossy magazine like she owned the air itself. Margaret entered the jet with her usual quiet grace, her folder of reports pressed firmly to her chest. She greeted them both, but only Wyatt responded with a faint nod. Izzy didn't even look up. Margaret sat opposite them, sensing the tension in the air. It had been days since the dinner incident. She hoped this business trip, a conference in Geneva, would help heal what pride had broken. But deep down, she felt the storm still brewing. Halfway through the flight, Izzy began her performance. "So," Izzy said casually, "I heard the board wasn't happy about you approving the new trade deal." Margaret looked up from her notes. "That's because the contract was rushed and lacked proper legal review." Wyatt sighed. "Mother, we've discussed this." Izzy smirked, pretending innocence. "I'm sure she only means well, even if she doesn't trust you to handle things yourself." Margaret's voice was calm but cutting. "Trust must be earned, Miss Hart, not whispered into someone's ear." Izzy leaned back, smiling sweetly. "I suppose experience sometimes makes people think they own wisdom." Margaret's eyes flashed. "And ignorance makes people believe they don't need it." Wyatt slammed his pen down. "Enough. I'm tired of this constant back and forth." Izzy touched his arm gently, her voice soft as silk. "She means well, darling, but she doesn't realize how much she's hurting you." Margaret froze. "Hurting him? By telling the truth?" Wyatt glared. "You're not helping, Mother." Her voice shook with quiet pain. "And she is?" The cabin air turned heavy. Even the flight attendants exchanged worried glances. Izzy stood and pretended to walk away, but not before whispering loud enough for Margaret to hear, "She doesn't respect you, Wyatt. Not as a man, not as a leader." Margaret clenched her fists. "You're playing a dangerous game, young woman." Wyatt stood abruptly. "That's enough." His tone was sharp, harsher than ever before. "You've been second-guessing me for months. Every meeting, every decision, every step I take, you're there correcting me like I'm still your student." Margaret stared at him in disbelief. "Wyatt, But he cut her off, his pride fully consuming him. "I'm done being treated like a child. If you can't respect me as the man in charge, maybe you shouldn't be on this flight." The words hit like a slap. Izzy's lips twitched in satisfaction. The jet fell silent. Only the soft hum of engines filled the air. Margaret's voice broke the quiet, slow, trembling, full of grace even in pain. "If leaving will give you peace, then I'll do it. But remember, peace built on pride doesn't last." Wyatt turned away, jaw clenched, refusing to look at her. "Pilot," he said coldly through the intercom, "find the nearest airfield. Drop her off." The pilot hesitated, stunned. "Sir, mid-route?" "Do it," Wyatt barked. Margaret looked at her son one last time, the same boy she once carried in her arms now sitting like a stranger. She smiled faintly, though tears glimmered in her eyes. "You've grown taller, Wyatt, but somehow, smaller." She gathered her bag, stood, and walked toward the exit as the plane began descending. Izzy watched her like a queen watching her rival fall. When the door opened at the small airstrip below, a gust of wind swept through the cabin. Margaret stepped down slowly, her scarf fluttering behind her like a white flag. She didn't turn around, not once. Wyatt stood motionless, watching through the window as his mother disappeared into the distance. For a second, pride felt like victory. But as the door closed, something heavy settled in his chest. The silence felt different now, not triumphant, but hollow. Izzy placed her hand on his arm. You did the right thing, darling. You can't lead with her shadow hanging over you. He nodded weakly, but inside, he wasn't sure if he'd freed himself, or lost himself. Hours later, the jet landed in Geneva. Cameras flashed, reporters called his name, and Izzy smiled beside him for the perfect photograph. But behind every flash of light, guilt whispered louder. That night, in the quiet of his hotel suite, Wyatt stared at his reflection again, the same reflection that haunted him after every argument. He saw pride, yes, but also something else, emptiness. Izzy entered, draping her arms around him. You look troubled, she said softly. He didn't answer. She'll never forgive me, he whispered. Izzy smiled faintly. Oh, she will. Mothers always do. But even as she said it, her eyes glittered with triumph, the kind of victory that tastes sweet only to the one who causes pain. 2 days later, Wyatt returned home. The mansion felt different, colder, quieter, lonelier. He found Margaret in the garden, watering her flowers as if nothing had happened. He approached slowly. Mother! She didn't turn. I see the sky didn't fall without me on your plane. Wyatt sighed. I was angry. I said things I shouldn't have. She looked at him then, calm, graceful, but with a sadness deeper than words. Anger reveals what pride tries to hide. He swallowed hard. Can you forgive me? Margaret smiled faintly. I always will. But forgiveness doesn't erase disappointment, Wyatt. It only hides it. He lowered his head, guilt crushing the pride he'd built. That night, as he walked through the empty halls of Sterling Manor, Wyatt realized something had changed forever. His mother forgave him, but her eyes no longer carried the same trust. There was distance now, invisible but strong. And though he didn't know it yet, that one act of arrogance, that single order to drop his mother mid-flight, would become the scar that followed him for the rest of his life. Days passed after the jet incident, but the silence between Wyatt and Margaret stretched like a wall too high to climb. The house that once echoed with warm conversation now sounded like a museum, beautiful but lifeless. Margaret spoke little. She didn't shout, didn't argue. She simply watched her son drift further away. Wyatt thought the apology had fixed everything. He believed forgiveness meant the wound had healed. But deep inside, something fragile had cracked between them, trust. And Izzy saw that crack as her doorway. At the next company gala, Izzy clung to Wyatt's arm like a diamond accessory. In public, she was charm itself, polite, generous, smiling for every camera. Your son is the future, she told board members sweetly. Mrs. Sterling raised a great man. Margaret smiled tightly, but her eyes saw through the act. She could feel the poison under Izzy's honeyed words. Later that night, when the guests were gone, Izzy dropped her act. She threw her heels aside, her tone sharp and venomous. You saw how they looked at you, Wyatt. They don't respect you. They still see your mother as the real power. Wyatt frowned. That's not true. Oh, isn't it? She shot back. Did you see how Mr. Dunlap toasted her first? She's still the queen, and you, the prince waiting for permission. Wyatt turned away. You're exaggerating. Izzy stepped closer, lowering her voice. You'll never have full control of your company until you stop letting her pull your strings. Her words hit the same wound she'd been pressing for months, his pride. The next morning, Wyatt stormed into the boardroom earlier than usual. He noticed the way his mother's old allies greeted him, polite but cautious. Every handshake felt forced, every smile strained. Izzy's voice echoed in his mind, they respect her, not you. When the meeting began, Margaret questioned a small financial report. Wyatt, this transaction in Singapore looks rushed. Did you review it properly? He forced a smile. I did. Trust me. She frowned. I do trust you. I just want to make sure. Wyatt slammed the report shut. Then stop checking everything I do like I'm 12 years old. The board members went silent. Margaret's face turned pale. She looked at her son, not angry, just broken. Wyatt, she said softly, you're shouting at the wrong person. Izzy sat quietly at the far end of the table, pretending to check her phone, a tiny smirk hiding beneath her expression. After the meeting, Margaret approached Wyatt in his office. You embarrassed yourself today, she said. He laughed dryly. No, Mother. I took control. She crossed her arms. Control isn't shouting. It's leading. Maybe your version, he snapped, but I'm not you. Margaret looked him straight in the eye. No, you're not. But I wish you remembered who taught you everything you know. He turned his back to her. You've taught me enough to survive without you. Those words sliced her heart open. She stood there quietly, then whispered, then I hope you survive what's coming. And she walked out. That night, Izzy poured herself a glass of red wine, sitting on the couch as Wyatt paced the room. You were too soft again, she said calmly. He frowned. What are you talking about? She humiliated you in front of the board. If you were strong, you'd remind her who's really in charge. I don't want to fight my mother, he said, voice low. Izzy laughed coldly. You already did, darling. You just haven't realized it yet. Wyatt sank into the chair, guilt heavy on his chest. You twist everything. She leaned close, whispering, no, Wyatt. I just show you what's been true all along, your mother doesn't believe in you. The board doesn't either. They follow her orders, not yours. You need to take control, or you'll lose everything you've built. Her words burned like acid. He hated how easily they made sense. Meanwhile, Margaret sat alone in her study, going through company files. Her instincts told her something dark was moving under the surface. She found irregular transfers, missing reports, and strange authorizations. Izzy's name was never written, but Margaret could smell her hand in it. She whispered to herself, she's feeding him lies while she drains him blind. Her assistant, Clara, entered quietly. Should we alert the auditors? Margaret shook her head. Not yet. He won't believe me. Not until he loses something first. There was sadness in her tone, but also quiet strength. She wasn't going to fight with tears, she would fight with proof. A few days later, Wyatt arrived home late. He found Izzy waiting in the living room, pretending to be upset. They're saying awful things about you at the office, she said dramatically. He frowned. Who? The old guard, your mother's loyal men. They think you're weak, that you're only CEO because of her. Wyatt clenched his fists. Who said that? She shrugged, fake tears glistening. It doesn't matter. You know what they think. You need to show them who runs this empire. He looked away, furious but confused. Maybe I should start replacing people. Izzy smiled through her fake sadness. Exactly. Start with the ones closest to your mother. That's how you prove you're the real boss. The next day, Wyatt fired 2 longtime executives, both men Margaret had worked with for years. The company buzzed with gossip. Margaret confronted him in disbelief. You fired Robert and Kane? They've been with us since your father's time. He kept his voice firm. They were leaking information. Leaking? Or disagreeing? He glared at her. You're questioning me again. Her voice broke slightly. Because I still see the son I raised, somewhere behind the man she's turning you into. Wyatt said nothing. The silence between them screamed louder than words. That night, Izzy kissed his cheek and whispered, now you're finally doing what a leader should. Wyatt closed his eyes, the victory tasting bitter. He could still see his mother's face, hurt but proud, sad but unbroken. He didn't realize that with every lie Izzy told, he wasn't just losing his mother. He was losing himself. The sky outside the Sterling jet was painted gold by the evening sun, but inside, the air was thick with quiet tension. Wyatt sat beside Izzy, reading reports he barely understood anymore. Margaret sat across from them, calm but watchful, her face tired yet proud. This was the first time they had traveled together again since the last flight, the one that ended in humiliation. Izzy smiled sweetly, pretending peace, but her eyes burned with something sharper. She had waited for this moment, another chance to push mother and son apart, once and for all. "Mrs. Sterling," Izzy began softly, "you must be proud of your son. He's finally learning to make his own decisions." Margaret's voice was gentle but firm. "I've always been proud of him. I just wish all his decisions were truly his." Wyatt glanced up. "What's that supposed to mean?" Margaret met his eyes. "It means not every voice beside you speaks with love." Izzy laughed lightly, a fake sweetness coating her words. "Ah, there it is again, the warning tone. You can't let go, can you?" Margaret turned sharply. "And you can't stop playing the innocent while planting poison." Wyatt slammed his tablet shut. "Enough. I can't take this constant war between you two." Izzy pouted. "I didn't start it, darling. She always looks for a reason to attack me." Margaret frowned. "I attack no one. I defend what matters." Izzy's tone sharpened. "You defend control, not love. Admit it, you can't stand seeing him happy without you." Margaret's patience finally cracked. "Happiness built on lies isn't happiness. It's slavery dressed in luxury." Wyatt rose, his voice loud enough to make the flight attendants freeze in place. "Stop it, both of you." Izzy quickly stood, pretending to be hurt. "You see, Wyatt? I can't do this anymore. She hates me for loving you." Margaret glared. "Love? You call manipulation love?" Wyatt turned to his mother, angry and defensive. "Why do you always do this? Every time things are calm, you destroy it." Margaret's voice trembled, but her eyes didn't break. "I'm trying to protect you from a woman who doesn't love you, she loves your power." Izzy gasped dramatically. "That's enough." She stepped closer to Margaret, her voice rising. "You think you're the only woman who can care for him? You treat him like a trophy you refuse to share." Margaret's tone grew colder. "Better a mother's truth than a lover's lies." Izzy snapped. "You old woman, you don't own him anymore." Margaret stood, fury flashing through her calm exterior. "Watch your mouth, young lady." Izzy stepped closer, her words sharp as knives. "Or what? You'll lecture me again? You've done nothing but make him feel small." Wyatt tried to intervene, but Margaret's pride refused to bow. "At least I built this empire before you learned to spell your own name." Izzy's face turned red with rage. "You're pathetic." Margaret's hand twitched, not to strike, but to stop the shaking that came from anger and heartbreak. "And you," she said slowly, "are dangerous." The argument grew louder. The jet felt smaller, like a cage filled with pride and poison. "Wyatt," Izzy said suddenly, tears falling, "if she can't respect me, I won't be on this flight." Margaret turned to her son. "Then let her leave. For once, choose right." Wyatt's chest tightened. Two voices. Two loves. Two worlds tearing him apart. He looked at his mother, strong but defiant, and at Izzy, crying but cunning. Izzy whispered, "You'll always be her puppet if you don't stop this now." Margaret whispered, "You'll lose everything if you listen to her again." Something inside Wyatt snapped. Pilot, he said coldly, find a place to land. Now. Margaret blinked, disbelief washing over her. Wyatt, not again. He didn't look at her. I can't do this anymore. Get off the plane. Izzy wiped her fake tears, hiding her smile behind her hand. Margaret's voice was soft, shaking. You're repeating the same mistake. Don't let pride be your chain. Wyatt turned away. You've done enough. The plane began to descend. The sound of the engines filled the silence no one dared to break. Margaret stood, straightened her coat, and looked at her son one last time. Her voice was quiet but carried every ounce of pain a mother could feel. One day, you'll understand what you've lost. She walked slowly toward the door, each step heavy, each breath a farewell. The flight attendant opened the door. Wind roared through the cabin as she stepped out onto the small landing strip below. Izzy watched her leave, her lips curving into the faintest, cruelest smile. When the door closed, the silence returned, deeper, emptier, crueler. Wyatt sat back in his chair, heart pounding, but pride kept him from showing regret. He stared at the floor, then out the window, but he couldn't escape the image of his mother walking away under the burning sun. Izzy touched his hand gently. You did what you had to do. She would have ruined everything. He didn't reply. He couldn't. Later that night, when they landed, Wyatt locked himself in the hotel bathroom. He looked in the mirror, his reflection pale, his eyes hollow. He whispered, "What have I done?" But no one answered. Only silence, the kind that follows a second betrayal. Back at home, Margaret sat by her window, watching the stars. Her heart ached, but her face stayed strong. So this is what pride does, she murmured. It blinds love until it turns cruel. Then she turned to her reflection and whispered, "No more tears. The battle starts now." Her forgiveness was gone. What replaced it was resolve. And far away, Wyatt sat beside Izzy, his guilt heavy and his pride breaking quietly beneath her gentle lies, still unaware that the real war for his soul had just begun. The world saw it as love. Magazines called them the golden couple. Business headlines praised Wyatt Sterling's fresh direction. But behind those glossy covers, the truth was darker. Izzy Hart had taken over everything. She had the passwords to Wyatt's emails, his bank accounts, and even the company's confidential files. She knew every secret, every weakness, and every opportunity to exploit it. Wyatt didn't see it. He thought it was love, loyalty disguised as partnership. But everyone else saw it for what it was, control. Sterling Global began to change. Board meetings turned into social gatherings. Executives complained quietly about the woman in red making business decisions. Izzy hosted lavish parties under the company's name, filled with models, politicians, and strangers who had nothing to do with the firm. When Margaret's name came up, Izzy laughed. She's old-fashioned. We're in a new era now. Wyatt said nothing. He hated confrontation. He told himself these parties were good publicity, that Izzy was helping the brand stay modern. But deep down, he knew it was slipping away from him. At one party, held inside the Sterling Global Ballroom, Izzy stood on stage in a sparkling gown. Cameras flashed. The company logo glowed behind her. "To Wyatt Sterling," she said, raising a glass, "the man who gave Sterling Global its soul." The guests cheered. Wyatt forced a smile. He didn't feel like the man she described. He felt like her accessory, the face behind her show. From the corner of the room, two of his senior board members whispered quietly. "She's turning this place into her kingdom. And he's too blind to stop her." Izzy caught their glance and smiled, that sharp, calculating smile. She knew exactly what they were thinking. And she knew how to destroy them if they spoke. The next morning, Wyatt walked into his office and found Izzy sitting in his chair, typing something on his computer. He frowned. "What are you doing?" She turned, smiling casually. Just replying to a few emails for you. I know your schedule better than your secretary. You shouldn't be in my account. Her tone turned cold. Oh, so now you don't trust me? He sighed, softening. That's not what I said. She stood and walked toward him. Then stop making me feel like a stranger. We're a team, remember? Wyatt nodded weakly, but unease crept through him. For the first time, he realized he didn't know what she was capable of anymore. Later that day, the board confronted him in a private session. Wyatt, Mr. Dunlap began carefully, with all due respect, Miss Hart has been overstepping. Wyatt frowned. In what way? She's been attending meetings without invitation, signing off media partnerships, and changing internal directives without board approval. She's acting under my direction, Wyatt said defensively, though his voice wavered. Another member spoke. Then you're letting her destroy your credibility. Wyatt slammed his pen on the table. I said she's helping. If you can't accept that, you can resign. They all fell silent. They didn't see the confident CEO anymore, they saw a man under someone's spell. That evening, Izzy poured him a drink, smiling. Rough day? Wyatt nodded. They think you're interfering. She laughed, a cold, dismissive sound. Of course they do. Old men hate powerful women. He didn't answer. He just looked at her, radiant, dangerous, impossible to resist. You don't think I'm controlling you, do you? She asked, her tone playful but sharp. He shook his head slowly. No. She leaned closer, whispering, good. Because everything I do for us. But Wyatt wasn't sure who us really meant anymore. Meanwhile, Margaret sat in her study, reading reports from inside the company. Her sources told her everything, the wasteful parties, the suspicious transfers, the disrespect towards senior staff. She whispered to herself, so this is her victory, chaos painted as confidence. Her assistant asked quietly, should we intervene? Margaret shook her head. Not yet. Let them celebrate. Pride always throws its own downfall party. Her calm voice hid the storm building inside her. A few days later, Sterling Global was featured in a major business magazine. The cover showed Izzy and Wyatt standing side by side, smiling like royalty. The headline read, Power couple rewrites corporate rules. Margaret looked at the photo, her heart aching. He looks like her shadow, she murmured. Inside the company, the staff's loyalty began to shift. Some started following Izzy's orders directly. Others quietly resigned. The old guard felt suffocated. The once professional environment had turned into gossip, greed, and glamour. One afternoon, Wyatt's longtime secretary, Mrs. Hale, approached him nervously. Sir. Miss Hart asked me to transfer funds from the emergency account to a private marketing firm. I thought I should confirm with you first. Wyatt frowned. What firm? She handed him the document. His heart dropped, the signature at the bottom was his. But he hadn't signed it. He confronted Izzy later that night. Did you sign documents in my name? Izzy smiled faintly. Oh, Wyatt. Don't make a big deal out of small things. It was for the company. You forged my signature. She laughed. I saved your reputation. That's what I did. He stared at her, angry, confused, and strangely afraid. You're crossing lines, Izzy. She leaned closer. No, darling. I'm drawing them. You just have to decide which side you're on. The next morning, Wyatt arrived at work and found another article online, photos from the party, Izzy in the spotlight, headlines calling her the real face behind Sterling Global's success. His blood ran cold. He stormed into his office, only to find Izzy on the phone, smiling for the cameras. Yes, of course. My husband-to-be will be thrilled to sponsor your event, she said sweetly. Wyatt froze. Husband-to-be? She hung up and smiled. It's good for the brand. Wyatt whispered, You're not building a brand. You're building yourself. Izzy smirked. And you're welcome to stay in it, as long as you don't get in my way. From that day, the empire built on family, loyalty, and trust began to rot quietly under Izzy's control. And while Wyatt believed he still held power, everyone around him could see the truth: he was no longer the CEO. He was the puppet. And the strings were in Izzy's manicured hands. The morning of the meeting began with thunder, not in the sky, but in Wyatt's mind. His thoughts clashed like storms. He stood before the mirror in his penthouse, tightening his tie, rehearsing the words Izzy had whispered all night. You're the CEO now. Prove it. Her voice echoed like a spell. For months, she had been preparing him for this moment, the day he would finally take full control of Sterling Global and remove his mother's authority once and for all. When Margaret built the family trust, she'd done it to protect the company's legacy. But now, Izzy called it a chain around your neck. Wyatt looked out the window at the city skyline, bright, rich, endless, and convinced himself that this was leadership. That this decision was necessary. That Izzy was right. But somewhere deep inside, a small voice whispered otherwise. He ignored it. The boardroom was full by 9 a.m., the long mahogany table polished, the air heavy with unspoken tension. Margaret sat at her usual seat, graceful and calm, unaware of what her son was about to do. Izzy stood behind Wyatt like a queen behind her puppet king. Wyatt entered with the papers in his hand, the decree that would remove Margaret from the trust and make him the sole decision-maker of Sterling Global. Margaret smiled faintly when she saw him. You look nervous, she said gently. He forced a chuckle. Just focused. She nodded. Good. But remember, focus means nothing without wisdom. Izzy's lips twitched at the edge. Wisdom, she thought, is for those who have already lost power. The meeting began. Reports were read. Numbers were discussed. And then, Wyatt cleared his throat. There's one more issue we need to address, he said. His voice was steady, but his hands trembled beneath the table. Margaret looked at him curiously. What issue? He slid the papers across the table. A revision of the family trust. The room went quiet. Margaret picked up the document, scanning the first page. Her expression shifted from confusion, to disbelief, to heartbreak. Wyatt, she whispered, what is this? He swallowed hard. It's time I take full control. The board needs clarity in leadership. She stared at him, her voice low and trembling. You mean control without me? Izzy spoke softly, her tone dripping with sugar. Mrs. Sterling, you've done your part. Now it's Wyatt's time to lead. Margaret turned slowly to her son. Is this your voice speaking, or hers? Wyatt's pride flared. Mine. This is my decision. The older board members shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Dunlap, who had known Wyatt since childhood, spoke up. Are you sure about this, son? This will remove your mother's legal rights as co-trustee. Wyatt nodded. Yes. I'm sure. Margaret leaned back in her chair, her calm composure returning, the calm that comes when pain becomes too deep for words. You've let a stranger convince you that power means freedom, she said softly. But power built on betrayal never lasts. Izzy crossed her arms. Maybe betrayal is just a word the weak use when they lose. Margaret looked at her, eyes cold as steel. And lies are what the proud use to justify their fall. The tension snapped like glass. Wyatt slammed his pen onto the document and signed his name with trembling hands. The sound of the pen scraping across paper felt like thunder. When he pushed the paper toward his mother, the room fell silent. Margaret stared at her son, not angry, not even shocked anymore. Just empty. After everything, she said quietly, you still don't understand. I wasn't fighting you for power, Wyatt. I was fighting for you. Wyatt looked away. It's done. She stood slowly, gathering her files with quiet dignity. So it is. As she walked past Izzy, the younger woman smiled faintly and whispered, some battles are better lost, Mrs. Sterling. Margaret stopped, turned, and met her eyes. Enjoy your victory, Miss Hart. The fall is always lonelier than the climb. Izzy's smile faltered, just for a second. Then Margaret turned to her son one last time. You've traded truth for applause. I hope the noise keeps you company when the silence returns. She walked out, her heels echoing across the marble floor, each step a goodbye that Wyatt would hear for years to come. When the door closed, Wyatt sat frozen. His chest felt tight, but his pride held him still. Izzy placed her hands on his shoulders, her voice smooth and triumphant. You did it, she whispered. You're finally free. But he didn't feel free. He felt heavy. He looked at his signature on the page, bold, final, irreversible, and for the first time, it looked like a scar instead of a victory. Outside, reporters waited. Cameras flashed as Izzy and Wyatt stepped into the lobby. Mr. Sterling, how does it feel to take full control? One shouted. Wyatt forced a smile. It's the next chapter for Sterling Global. Izzy squeezed his arm proudly. And for us. Margaret's car passed by just as the cameras clicked. Through the tinted glass, she saw her son standing beside the woman who had torn their world apart. She didn't cry, not this time. Instead, she whispered to herself, he's chosen his crown of thorns. That night, Wyatt sat alone in his office. The city lights outside shimmered, but inside, everything felt dim. Izzy was gone, celebrating with her friends. The decree sat on his desk, a symbol of triumph to the world, but to him, a quiet confession of weakness. He poured himself a drink and stared at his reflection in the glass. For the first time, he didn't see a CEO. He saw a son who had just exiled the only person who ever truly loved him. And somewhere far away, Margaret Sterling, the woman he'd silenced, was already planning her return. The morning after the boardroom war, the city woke to a different kind of headline. Sterling Global's power shift, son ousts mother from family trust. The news spread like wildfire, in newspapers, business talk shows, gossip blogs. Wyatt Sterling, once the golden image of loyalty, was now branded the man who betrayed his own blood. Inside the company, whispers replaced greetings. Some employees avoided eye contact, others spoke in hushed tones. He really removed his mother? They say the girlfriend pushed him to it. Poor Mrs. Sterling, she built this empire. Wyatt walked through the hallway pretending not to hear, but the words followed him like ghosts. Every smile from Izzy felt colder now, every cheer from her friends sounded forced. The more the world applauded him, the smaller he felt inside. Meanwhile, Margaret sat in her old office, stripped of title, but not of wisdom. She poured herself a cup of tea, steady hands hiding a storm inside her. Her assistant, Clara, placed a tablet on the desk showing the headline. Clara whispered, "They're saying he betrayed you, ma'am. Should we respond to the press?" Margaret shook her head calmly. No. Let the noise fade. Storms reveal who can stand still. Her calm voice masked sharp intent. She had seen greed before, smooth smiles, fake loyalty, polished ambition. Izzy Hart was no different, only bolder, and that made her dangerous. Margaret had built too many empires to be destroyed by a pretender. Now, she would build something else, revenge. At Sterling Global, the atmosphere turned tense. Board members who once supported Wyatt began holding secret discussions. Mr. Dunlap, the oldest member, whispered to another, "He's lost control. She's running the company now. We can't trust her. Or him." By afternoon, rumors reached the media: embezzlement, internal chaos, missing funds. None proven, all damaging. When Wyatt stormed into the boardroom demanding answers, the members fell silent. He slammed the morning paper onto the table. Who's leaking these lies? No one spoke. Then Mr. Dunlap said softly, maybe not lies, son. Maybe just consequences. Wyatt's voice rose. I run this company. The old man met his eyes. Then start acting like it. That night, Izzy tried to calm him with her usual charm. Baby, ignore them, she purred, sitting beside him. They're jealous. You're young, rich, and powerful, they can't stand that. He turned away. They don't respect me anymore. She smiled faintly. Respect is overrated. Fear lasts longer. Wyatt looked at her, confused. That's not how my mother ran this company. Izzy laughed. Exactly. And look where she is now, sitting at home, sipping tea, forgotten. Her words sliced deeper than she knew. Wyatt poured himself a drink, his reflection shaking in the glass. She may be out, he muttered, but she's not finished. Izzy rolled her eyes. Oh, please. She's old. You're the future. Wyatt didn't answer. For the first time, he wasn't sure which of them was right. Across town, Margaret's home glowed with quiet light. Inside, a small meeting took place: old allies, loyal friends, and 2 shareholders who still believed in her. We can't fight him directly, one said cautiously. Margaret smiled. We won't. We'll fight the disease, not the host. They looked at her, puzzled. Izzy Hart, she continued, her voice calm but sharp as glass. She's the disease. Wyatt is the infected. Her plan began to unfold, slowly, quietly, with precision. She reached out to old partners, long-forgotten investors, and silent shareholders who owed her favors. Each conversation was like moving a chess piece, controlled, strategic, deadly. Within weeks, the cracks in Wyatt's empire deepened. A key investor withdrew. A project collapsed due to poor planning. And the board, once silent, began calling for emergency meetings. Margaret's allies moved unseen, feeding the press small truths wrapped in mystery. Anonymous sources spoke of financial mismanagement, internal fraud, and questionable influence inside Sterling Global. Izzy panicked. They're trying to destroy us, she shouted at Wyatt one night. Us? He echoed bitterly. This started the day you made me sign that paper. She snapped back. You wanted power. And you wanted control. They stared at each other, love replaced by accusation, attraction replaced by resentment. Wyatt whispered coldly, maybe my mother was right about you. Izzy froze, then laughed softly, the kind of laugh that hides fear. Your mother's not the problem, Wyatt. You are. The next morning, Margaret received a confidential report from Clara. Ma'am, we traced the missing funds. They were moved through one of Izzy's shell accounts. Margaret's eyes darkened, but her voice stayed calm. Good. Don't expose her yet. Let her think she's winning. Clara frowned. Why wait? Because revenge tastes better when it's earned, Margaret said. And right now, she's still dancing. She leaned back, her face half in shadow, half in light. The quiet, gentle mother the world once knew was gone. In her place stood a strategist, patient, ruthless, and ready. At Sterling Global, the staff noticed the change in Wyatt. His confidence was cracking. Meetings ended with shouting. Decisions were rushed. Even Izzy's smile no longer worked on him. When he entered his mother's old office one night, dust still lingering on her empty chair, he whispered, "You warned me." He touched the desk where she once sat, remembering her calm tone, her careful advice, her words that once annoyed him, "Power built on betrayal never lasts." he shut his eyes. For the first time, he believed it. Meanwhile, Margaret looked out her window as rain began to fall. The storm had started, the one she planned herself. She whispered softly, "You took my crown, Wyatt, but I kept the kingdom." And somewhere across the city, Izzy raised a glass to her own reflection, unaware that the woman she thought defeated was already preparing her downfall, one silent move at a time. Subscribe now and click the video you are seeing your screen right now to watch part 2.